Before he was elected, Obama said his goal was to close down the coal-burning power plants. He failed to get his legislation through Congress. His global warming agenda failed, so he has turned to the EPA, and now the new excuse is mercury. Mercury causes children to be born retarded. Mercury. Yet, in the 22 years since Congress tasked the EPA to study the health risks of mercury, the agency has not identified a single child whose learning or other disabilities can be traced to prenatal mercury exposure. The EPA's December 2000 appropriate and necessary determination, the trigger for the utility MACT rule, utility MACT, depicted power plant mercury emissions as a significant growing public health threat. That was sheer exaggeration. The EPA projected that power plant mercury emissions would increase from 46 tons per year in 1990 to 60 tons per year in 2010. In fact, emissions declined to 29 tons per year in 2011, 50% below EPA's projection. Mercury. How might a child be exposed to mercury before birth, prenatal? He might be exposed to mercury through the fillings in his mother's teeth. Several recent studies profiled the prevalence of autism and its relation to environmental factors such as proximity to coal-burning power plants. However, while these studies do not support causation, they do support a plausible argument that mercury may be involved and warrants further investigation. They support a plausibility argument. Even though the EPA has not identified a single child who is defective because of mercury. You know, if mercury did cause birth defects, mental impairment, a place to look would be vaccines, because vaccines are preserved with a mixture of mercury, a topic of much heated debate in the broader autism area has been vaccinations, more specifically the inclusion of a preservative in vaccines given to children and pregnant women. This preservative is 50% mercury by weight. If you're concerned with mercury toxicity in the unborn children, the place to look, first of all, would be the preservative in vaccines given to children and pregnant women. But at this point, we don't know what causes autism, for example. It's too complex. The studies have produced no results. This brings us to Mr. Beale, John Beale, the secret agent man deep inside the belly of the EPA, working hand in hand with Gina McCarthy to devise the rules just mentioned. Since he cannot persuade the Congress to outlaw coal-fired power plants, Obama is regulating them out of existence through the EPA. That's where John Beale, secret agent man, comes in. We find by reading his emails and by reading his deposition given to the House Oversight and Reform Committee, headed by Darrell Issa, that John Beale not only worked on these regulations to outlaw coal-burning power plants and cripple the U.S. economy, but he also worked on trade negotiations. This guy's a jack of all trades. Question: did Gina McCarthy ever solicit your advice on EPA policy decisions? Answer: sure. Any things that had to do with international issues or climate change, we would, and that would also include I'd had quite a bit of experience working at negotiating trade agreements. And so when the negotiations were going on for the Pacific Trade Agreement, we talked a lot about that, and I kind of managed the process.